What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg. We like magic, and I'm here today with a deck that I am actually really excited to bring to you. Here's Mono Black Monument. Now, the reason I'm so excited about bringing you this deck is that it's one of those rare decks that comes along every now and again that's reasonably budget. This deck's only $50 to put together, but your opponent still has to respect it. This deck has all the right moves, man. It's got some good removal, lots of good synergy, and card draw all day to back up that synergy. Lots of powerful creatures, and it can close the game out in a hurry, sometimes out of nowhere. So this deck does a lot of really cool stuff that ends up being super, super fun, and it's really cheap to build. So let me show it to you. We'll start at the beginning with 4 copies of Bantu's Monument. I might be from the South, but this is just about the only monument I care about. These are the jokes! Last season, a lot of people were stuck on Oketra's Monument. Good card, yeah, but I always kind of figured Bantu's to be the other good monument in Standard. I've always really liked this, you know? We're playing 30 creatures in this deck, so that's an awful lot of cards we get a discount on, and that's a butt ton of drains, too. Sometimes we'll do 5, 7, or more drains in a game after you get your Bantu's down, and that's a quarter or more of our opponent's life total, and we've gained a bunch of life too. A life swing like that can't be ignored, and we can sometimes just like stall out a game and win with a Bantu's Monument. It also leads to explosive turn 4 and onward plays. You know, turn 4 after a Bantu's Monument, you can get 2 3-drops. That's a ton of value, and it also makes really expensive dudes a lot more realistic to play, which is important in this deck. We're playing a couple of fairly expensive dudes, so with that in mind, we're going to play all 4 Bantu's. It's that important to the deck. I know it's legendary, but we're looking to draw this as consistently as possible, as early as possible, so we'll go with the playset. But if we're going to get through those 30 creatures, we might as well go ahead and start. We're going to start actually at the higher end of the curve with the more important creatures, beginning with 3 copies of Marionette Master. Eminem's got a lot of work to do in this deck, but not even counting Marionette Master, we've got 16 cards that either are artifacts or can create artifacts in some way, shape, or form. So if you just set your Marionette Master to 4, you've got lots of ways to get lots of damage off of her. You know, some of our cards create treasure tokens. That's free to sacrifice. That's an easy 4 damage your opponent's way if you've got a Marionette Master out. We've also got some things that create servos and such. We've just got lots of artifacts in this deck that Master can work off of, including Bantu's Monument. That's sort of a good thing about playing 4 Monument, is that we can always play one on top of the other, and when one of them goes to the graveyard because of the legend rule, well, it's 4 damage. And while we're on the subject of Monument, it also makes it to where she only costs 5 to cast. That can be extremely important. So this is one of the ways that we can just win a game completely out of nowhere. We can cast Marionette Master, and sometimes even if we still have the mana left over to do a couple of other things, then we can just win a game real quick, deal 12 damage that same turn, and just take our opponent completely by surprise. Marionette Master is one of the better top-end plays we can make in this deck because it closes out a game like that. Now, the other big 3-of hammer that we're swinging in the deck is Herald of Anguish, something else that goes pretty well with 16 artifacts. Just a big, dumb, scary creature that's evasive and huge and immune to things like Fatal Push and Lightning Strike and Braid even. You know, it just has all the things to do in this deck. If you're up against a control or a more mid-rangey deck, it can make them discard cards. Up against aggro and Long Tusk Cub and such, you can just kill those guys by eating up artifacts and such. Just an amazing, amazing card. 5/5 flyers. There's something else that can close a game out quick, and this one's got a lot to do once it does hit the board. And it hits the board pretty easily. Again, not only do we have the 16 artifacts, but Bantu's Monument actually essentially makes this 2 mana less to cast. You know, it already makes your black creatures cost 1 less. You can just tap your Monument for Improvise. So this is something else that only costs 5 thanks to Bantu's Monument. So we'll pack 3 copies. I don't necessarily want to draw a bunch of copies of this in the early game, but I do want to, you know, somewhat ensure drawing at least 1 a game, because it often wins once you've got it down, and you can have it down for a couple of turns. Untapping with a Herald of Anguish is usually game over. Now let's talk for a minute about all the creatures that can create artifacts for us, and first we're going to talk about the treasure dudes. Briefly, here's Direfleet Hoarder. We're going to play all 4 copies of this. We're looking to trade this with a creature in the early game. We don't care if our Direfleet goes to the graveyard, and if we can take one of their creatures with it, that's just awesome. You know, if we can play this as a sort of delayed removal spell, that's exactly what we want to get out of it, and it gets us a treasure, either to ramp us to one of our big creatures, or to deal 4 damage once you actually get your Marionette Master down. But what I really want to talk about is Ruthless Knave. I've been waiting to talk about this card for a while, and I've had some faith in it ever since the first time I saw it. I mean, 3 mana, 3/2, that's at least a decent body. It has the ability to draw you cards, to sacrifice outlet, it ramps you, and it fixes your mana. What all exactly do you want? And by the way, you can use its ability, both of them, at instant speed. So, like, just on its face, this is a pretty good card. But in this deck, it's got a couple of specific things that it can do for us. One relevant thing it can do is get us to a Marionette Master when we only have 4 lands in play. And if we've got a Bantu's in play, we only have to have 3 lands in order to get to a Marionette Master, provided that we have Knave and 1 other creature, you know. So that's really important. That helps drive the land count down a little bit in the deck. But the other important thing that it does here is that it can funnel our creatures into artifacts that we can then funnel into Marionette Master, essentially, you know. If we can sacrifice one of our creatures, we get 2 artifacts, treasures that we can immediately sacrifice and deal 8 with a Marionette Master. That's a good deal. And sometimes we can sacrifice a Servo, which already deals 4 damage from Marionette Master, immediately get 2 treasures, and end up dealing 12 damage all at one time because of a Ruthless Knave and a Marionette Master. I should also note that the creature we just talked about, Direfleet Hoarder, perfect thing to sacrifice to a Ruthless Knave. You know, you get 3 treasures in that case, which again funnels directly into 12 damage from a Marionette Master. And you can cast something else. So, like, just Ruthless Knave, this is the home for it, at least that I've found so far. I've been trying to figure out what Ruthless Knave is supposed to do in this format, and this deck definitely makes it the truth. This feels like what Ruthless Knave is supposed to be doing. I'm also going to play 4 copies of Weaponcraft Enthusiast in the deck. This can give us 2 servos that we can sacrifice to Ruthless Knave or chump block with. We can go big on our board and just swing in with them, you know. Gives us a lot of versatility. I've always liked Weaponcraft Enthusiast, but this is definitely the deck for it. We can also sacrifice the Enthusiast itself to a Ruthless Knave, and that gives us a total of at least 4 artifacts on the battlefield at that point. 2 treasures and the 2 servos, so that makes improvising a Herald into play a snap. Super duper easy. So there's that too. So there's just so much for this to do in this deck too. But we can't just assume that we're going to have the perfect opening hand every time we draw 7 the first time. So we're going to have to draw some cards in this deck so that we can be a little bit more consistent. So with that in mind, we're going to play 4 copies of Glint Sleeve Siphoner and 4 copies of Ruin Raider. Well, Siphoner is the perfect early game creature for this deck before you've even played your Monument. Of course, once you have played your Monument, it's only 1 mana and you get a free drain. That's cool, but it's amazing on turn 2, where it's very likely it's going to get through on turn 3 and draw you at least 1 card in that game. And if it only draws you the 1 card, it's still done its job. Same thing goes with really all of our card drawers. Ruthless Knave, if it draws us 1 card in a game, it's done some pretty good work for us. We're okay with that. And the same thing is also true of Ruin Raider. If this only draws us 1 card, often the turn that it comes into play, it's still done enough work for us to be happy with it, especially for a 3-power body for just 3 mana. That's not bad. Not to mention, by the way, that even though these guys can do damage to you when you draw cards off of them, we are gaining a fair amount of life off of Bantu's Monument, and the last couple of cards that I want to show you can also gain us life. So let's talk about those real quick. First of all, to finish off the creatures, I'm going to play 4 copies of Gifted Aetherborn, and I know this doesn't get any kind of discount on Monument, but I really don't care. This is just one of the best black creatures in the entire format. I feel like we should play it. This is another great turn 2 play before you get to your Monument. Again, you don't even get a discount on it from Monuments. You might as well play it turn 2 if you possibly can. Because if you let it hang back, it's at least pseudo removal. This can kill almost anything on attacks and gain you back a little bit of life. That can be really important in the aggro matchup. And again, we've got Glint Sleeve Siphoner and Ruin Raider dealing a little bit of damage to us in a game. So this can help us gain back life from that and create a little bit of parity in terms of our life total. So I'm playing Gifted Aetherborn, all 4 copies of it. Amazing early game play, and not even a bad top deck either. And we'll finish off the main deck with 4 copies of Battle at the Bridge. This is the only other non-creature thing we're playing other than Bantu's Monument. I really wanted to maximize the number of creatures that we're playing in the deck, but I also wanted to play some removal, and this is surprisingly good removal right now. I'm going to say it once more. We got 16 artifacts or things that create artifacts in this deck, not counting Marionette Master. If you count Marionette Master, if you get the servos off of her, that's 19 things that make artifacts. So we have no shortage of stuff to improvise with. And even if you don't improvise a Battle at the Bridge at all, it's still a fine piece of removal, you know? This can kill gods. Extremely relevant that this can kill a Hazaret, you know, and it's going to gain you back a butt ton of life too, which is also really important in specifically the aggro matchup, but good in a lot of matchups, including, you know, the energy matchup where your life total isn't as much of a resource as you'd like it to be. You have to watch it. Battle's also a decent top deck, you know, because even if you're only killing something with like 4 toughness, you can gain like 7 or 8 life out of a battle at the bridge, depending on what you put into it, you know. You can gain way more life than the toughness of the creature that you're killing, and that's really important sometimes when you rip a battle at the bridge on turn 11, you know. It'll really get you right back in the game and take care of their biggest threat pretty much every time, unless the creature's name is Carnage Tyrant. So there's that. But aside from that, Battle at the Bridge can really bail you out of a lot of situations when you're staring down a Hazoret that you really kind of have no plan for. Now we're going to play 22 lands in this deck. I told you I love If You're Dead lands, and it's something else that benefits from the fact that Bantu's Monument and a couple of other cards can gain its life back, you know. But it's just another piece of removal, and that's just good. It's always good. So I'm going to play 4 If You're Dead lands in nearly every black deck that I play, so at least there's that. But you may notice that the land count is slightly low. That's because Bantu's lets us play things at a discount, and we've got a few things in the deck that give us treasure tokens. That helps ramp us a little bit, replace our lands in some situations. And we've got a lot of ways of drawing cards too, so that's yet another way that we can get to our lands when we need them. So I don't feel the need to play a bunch of lands in this deck. I think 22 is right. Here's our sideboard right here. First and foremost, that Duress is one of the most important cards on the board, and it's incredibly budget. It's only 10 cents to play Duress right now, and that means whole place that'll cost you less than half of an American dollar. Really good deal for one of the best sideboard cards in the whole format. You know, we just saw that Blue-Black Control performed fairly well at the World Championships. There's also the Blue-White Approach deck that's still going around. Grixis Control is a thing, and even the aggro and mid-range decks play like 10 removal pieces and non-creature spells and such. So things like Duress can be very, very important. And I've already mentioned the Blue-White Approach matchup. It cripples that deck sometimes if you can Duress an Approach out of their hand. So put all 4 copies in when you're playing against Approach. There's also an Argel's Bloodfast. Speaking of control, by the way, that's where this is usually going to come in. We want to draw as many cards as possible against control, and against control decks, our life total is usually much more usable as a resource to us than it is in the aggro and energy matchups, you know. So I'll put in the Argel's Bloodfast in that match. As far as Kitesail Freebooter, that will also often come in the control matchup. Note how much we hate control, and we really hate sweepers, so we want to be able to get those out of our opponent's hand. Kitesail Freebooter and Duress help with that. An Eternal is in there, on the other hand, against the mid-range and aggro matchups, because it's a huge dude that can stop a lot of what they're trying to do, and it's really cheap, especially with the Monument out. Getting to play a 5/5 for only 2 mana that just feels special. And we're going to play 2 copies of Aether Sphere in there. Also against the aggro matchup, we're going to be losing a fair amount of life to our own cards some of the time, so Aether Sphere is a godsend and works well with Glint-Sleeve Siphoner, and we've got a bunch of stuff that can crew the Aether Sphere too. So it could make it into the main deck if we wanted to free up a couple of slots, because it always comes in against the aggro match. And then there's the 1 copy of Gonti. This is against mid-range and control decks that have lots and lots of cool, fun stuff that we want to get with this Gonti. And here are your power rankings. A final score of 59 for just about $50. Well over $1 a point, and worth spending your money on. Because again, this deck is so fun and it does so much really well. You know, it looks like a clunky sort of mid-range creature combo deck thing, but actually it's really consistent. We play 4 ofs most of our cards and 3 ofs 2 of our cards. You know, we've got a bunch of stuff in the deck that can draw us cards. That brings our consistency up. We're only the 1 color, and so we do a lot for really not much in this deck, you know. Extremely consistent, we draw a lot of cards, and our defense could be a little bit better, but Battle at the Bridge and Gifted Aetherborn are both great options in that department. It's also the perfect format for this deck. We run up against control, we could have some problems. That's why most of our sideboard slots are devoted to that matchup. But in the mid-range matchup, we usually do extremely well, and there's a lot of mid-range energy decks out there right now. And the mid-range matchup is really good for us because it gives us more time than most other decks give us to set up and get our engine going, which we will need a couple of turns to do. But luckily, against a lot of the important decks in this format, we have plenty of time to do just that. Not to mention that we can win the game without ever even really attacking, you know. Just play a high density of creatures after you play your Monument, draw a couple of cards off of those creatures, play some more creatures. Suddenly you've done 8 or 10 drains in a game off of Monument, and all you need to do is sacrifice a couple of treasures and you win the game if you have a Master out. So even if we just get some chip damage in the early game, you know, 4 to 6 points of chip damage in the first 3-4 turns, we can convert that into a win pretty easily once we get a Marionette Master down and we start start playing creatures with our monument out. We won't ever have to attack again. We can just take the game with, you know, like gimmicky stuff like that, but it works. But I'm tapped out for now. That's all I've got to say about this one, so take it to the comments section and let me know how you felt about this one. Is it fun enough looking to you? Do you want to give this one a try? I'm really excited about this deck. Again, I don't know if you can tell, but I am happy about this one, you guys. So try it out and let me know what I missed. I should give a shout out here to Prying Blade. I really like to find room for this card in this deck. It's only 1 mana, so it would help with our improvised stuff. Creates treasures from Marionette Master and our improvised stuff. So, card looks pretty good to me, and it's only like 5 cents right now, so it could be like this deck is the home for it, but I'm not too sure that I can find room for it. But let me know what else I missed down there in the comments section. If you enjoyed this video, which I hope you did, put lots of work into it, you can hit the like button down there. It doesn't do much, but it makes me feel really good when I see a bunch of likes. So just, do that if you want to. You can also sub if you're new. We've got a lot of deck techs coming up. You want to see those, so sub and hit the bell for the notifications. Follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev or kick me $1 on Patreon at patreon.com/SBMTG. And you might want to do that because I'm doing another thing on Patreon here in the next couple of days, actually, in the next 3 or 4 days. What I'm going to do is I'm going to release my next 8 decks on Patreon, and I'm going to get all of my patrons to tell me what order those should come in. So if you're not a patron yet, kick at least $1 into the pot, and you can see the next 8 decks we're working on and help me determine the order of them. And, of course, remember, if you want to see this list in a more concise form than Fat Neckbeard and Batman shirt talking to you, you can always just, click the first link in the description box. That'll take you over to TCG Player, my sponsor. You can view the whole deck in one place right there, and you can even buy it if you want to, if you really want to, and I hope you do, because this deck is awesome. So, do all that stuff, and I'll see you cats later. I'm Deb from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards.